unfortunately, in any society where the police are present, there are going to be cases of misconduct or police brutality, and it's important for society to have some kind of check and balance to make sure that they are protecting the public, but also they're not abusing their power.
A team of lawyers and academics created a website of alleged police misconduct in Alberta. We're going to talk to lawyer Steve Grover about police misconduct and brutality on today's Ask the Lawyer. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks. Nice having me again.
Always great to talk to you. So, what is the Alberta Police Misconduct Database? Tell us who made it and what it's all about.
It was put in place about May of 2022, and it's a sort of like a registry. It was set up by a lawyer here in Alberta with an advocate group of trying to just keep transparency on misconduct in police officers in the province of Alberta. My understanding is you can go on to that database, put the constable's name and registration reg number, and figure out if there's been any misconduct against him or her. My understanding, the database goes back to 1992. It's just a way for people that if they are unfortunately subject to any kind of police brutality or misconduct, they can go on this database and say, hey, has that officer had problems before? Has anything been done? Obviously, the police force are very important for our society to keep people in check. But at the same time, there are, police misconduct matters that come up, police brutality. And I think it's more of important for the public to have a registry to look at and see if any officer they are in contact with had any kind of misconduct problems or hearings before in the past.
Is police misconduct a big issue in Alberta, and what issues have you seen?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, police misconduct is becoming more of a factor now because of, the growth of social media. Everyone's got a phone on, with camera, either if it's an iPhone or Samsung Galaxy. We've heard cases in the U.S. Obviously, one of the most famous cases going back to the early 90s with Rodney King in L.A. Unfortunately, there was the L.A. riots. The federal government in the U.S. came in and recharged those officers that were left off. And you have to understand the police. The police have an important role in society, and sometimes they do get stressed out. The job gets to them. Some of them take their power beyond control of what they should be doing and not be doing. And unfortunately, in any society where the police are present, there are going to be cases of misconduct or police brutality, and it's important for society to have some kind of check and balance to make sure that they are protecting the public, but also they're not abusing their power. So there are cases in Toronto. There are cases here in Alberta, we all have to work together to have a safe society.
Sure. And along those same lines, tell us what you and your firm do to assist people whose civil rights have been violated by police.
Well, in Canada, civil rights, they're not in the forefront like in the U.S. I think there's, the ACLU in America. People are very, important of their civil rights in America and in Canada. We have the Canadian Bill of Rights and the Charter of Freedoms. I think it's important for people to understand, police brutality cases are serious, but there's just, you can't go after the cop officer for anything. If they pull you over and give you a ticket, or they talk to you harsh, or if they're arresting you and you want to, go after them civilly for bending your arm, you have to be very careful in these cases, especially as a law firm. You are looking for where they're going beyond their scope of their power. Where they've actually, the person has suffered a catastrophic injury, seriously impaired, unfortunately. And these cases do happen in Canada. We do have a smaller population than America by a large amount, so they're not as frequent in Canada as they are in the U.S. And unfortunately, but these cases do happen. But as a law firm that does personal injury, I think it's important to protect civil liberties, people's civil rights. That's why we have a court system here in Canada too. But you have to be very selective in taking on these cases. Make sure you have the right client, the right injuries, and the right case where you can actually prove causation against an officer.
Right. Well, in addition to damages that can be collected, are there other changes that can come about as a result of these types of lawsuits?
Well, I think in any kind of civil, case, if it's a trucking case, a motorcycle case, not only is there damages that the person can get for personal injury, for pain and suffering, loss of income, future costs of care, but I think a lot of lawyers have to keep in mind that these cases, we're trying to change society one case at a time. And, if it's a trucking case, hey, we don't want to sue truckers, but we want to make the roads safer for everybody and have those bad truckers off the road. We need the police service here in Canada. I mean, they're part of our society and they keep people in check. I mean, we can't have a society that's anarchy and people can do whatever they want. Unfortunately, human beings, they can't really regulate each other. If they're going to break the law, if something happens. But at the end of the day, we have to keep the police force in check. And if there is a bad officer out on the police force, we don't want that to happen again. And I think it's important with these cases, not only seeking damages, but also setting precedent with the case where the police force can change some bad conduct, maybe, go through their screening and hiring officers more closely, have more regulation in place with their departments to make sure that their officers are in check and not abusing their powers, because we're all here to live together and we need the police force to keep law and order. And I think we all have to work together, but at the same time, these cases, we have to, if there's bad officers out there, make sure those officers aren't on the street.
And Steve, you mentioned police misconduct has been a major issue for several years now. Is this a political issue for you and the folks you assist?
I mean, it is a political issue. Politics is involved in everything. Unfortunately, as a lawyer, lawyers are involved in politics. It's not as big as a political issue as in the U.S. I know those cases really come to the forefront. The news media's pick them up. But, these cases are political because we want to keep people in check, make society safe for everybody, and they can be a political issue. My main concern in my office is protecting people that have been injured, get them the compensation they're entitled to, and protect their civil rights, but also the general public civil rights too. So these can be hotly contested political issues like in the U.S. too.
Well, Steve, it certainly is a hot button issue right now. We really appreciate your time and your expertise, as always.
Well, thank you for having me, and hope you have a great rest of the week.
You too. And that's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been Steve Grover. If you want to ask Steve a question about your situation, call the number on the screen. Thanks for watching. I'm Tom Mustin for Ask the Lawyers.